I bet you didn't know what happened to Daniel on that stormy night. It was a night like no other, with the wind howling through the trees and the rain lashing against the windows. The sky was a canvas of dark, swirling clouds, occasionally illuminated by flashes of lightning that seemed to tear the heavens apart. The atmosphere was charged with an eerie energy, as if the night itself was alive and watching. His car broke down, and he saw a flickering light in the distance, a beacon of hope in the oppressive darkness. The engine had sputtered and died, leaving him stranded on a desolate road with no sign of civilization in sight. The only thing that broke the monotony of the night was that faint, flickering light, beckoning him like a moth to a flame. Desperate and with no phone signal, Daniel followed the light to an old, decrepit house. The structure loomed out of the darkness, its silhouette jagged and menacing against the stormy sky. The windows were dark and empty, like the eyes of a long-dead creature, and the walls seemed to sag under the weight of years of neglect. Every step he took towards the house felt like a step deeper into a nightmare. The door creaked open before he even knocked, as if it had been waiting for him. The sound was a slow, mournful wail that sent shivers down his spine. It was as if the house itself was sighing, exhaling a breath it had held for centuries. The darkness inside seemed to pulse, alive with unseen eyes watching his every move. Inside, the air was thick with a stale, rotten smell, a miasma of decay that clung to his skin and filled his lungs. The walls were covered in a thick layer of dust, and the floorboards creaked ominously under his weight. Cobwebs hung like tattered curtains in the corners, and the dim light barely penetrated the gloom, casting long, eerie shadows that seemed to move on their own. He called out, but only silence answered. His voice echoed through the empty rooms, bouncing off the walls and fading into the darkness. It was as if the house had swallowed his words, absorbing them into its ancient, rotting heart. The silence was oppressive, a heavy blanket that smothered any hope of rescue. Just as he turned to leave, he heard soft, shuffling footsteps behind him. The sound was faint, almost imperceptible, but it sent a jolt of fear through his body. He whipped around, his heart pounding in his chest, but there was nothing there, just the empty, shadowy hallway stretching out before him. Whipping around, he saw a child's doll on the floor, its glassy eyes staring up at him. The doll was old and worn, its porcelain face cracked and its clothes tattered and stained. Its eyes seemed to follow him, unblinking and unnervingly lifelike. He could feel its gaze boring into him, a cold, malevolent presence that made his skin crawl. He could have sworn it wasn't there before. He was sure the hallway had been empty when he first entered the house. The doll's sudden appearance was inexplicable, and it filled him with a growing sense of dread. He tried to shake off the feeling, telling himself it was just his imagination playing tricks on him. Shrugging it off, he moved deeper into the house, hoping to find a phone. Each step he took was cautious, his senses on high alert. The house seemed to close in around him, the walls pressing in tighter with every passing moment. He could feel the weight of the darkness, a tangible force that threatened to overwhelm him. Suddenly he felt something cold brush his neck like tiny fingers grazing his skin. The touch was fleeting, but it sent a chill down his spine. He spun around, his breath coming in short, panicked gasps, but there was nothing there, just the empty, shadowy room. He spun around, but no one was there, just empty shadows. The darkness seemed to mock him, its silence a cruel reminder of his isolation. He could feel the fear building inside him, a rising tide that threatened to drown him in its icy grip. As he stumbled through the dim hallway, the doll appeared again, this time at his feet. Its presence was like a dark omen, a harbinger of the horrors that awaited him. He could feel its eyes on him, watching his every move with a malevolent intelligence. Its expression had twisted, a dark grin stretching across its porcelain face. The smile was grotesque, a mockery of joy that sent a wave of revulsion through him. He could see the cracks in its face, the lines deepening as the grin widened, and he knew that this was no ordinary doll. Heart racing, Daniel backed away, only to hear whispering voices echoing from the walls, calling his name in a chorus of hushed, raspy tones. The voices were faint, barely more than a breath, but they filled him with a terror unlike anything he had ever known. It was as if the house itself was alive, its walls whispering secrets that no living soul should ever hear. He bolted for the door, but the handle wouldn't budge. He pulled and twisted, his hands slick with sweat, but the door remained stubbornly closed. It was as if the house had trapped him, sealing him inside its dark, rotting heart. In the reflection of a nearby mirror, he saw not himself, but a pale, gaunt figure with hollow eyes grinning back at him. The figure was a twisted parody of his own reflection, its eyes empty and soulless. The grin on its face was a rictus of malevolent glee, and he could feel its gaze piercing through him, seeing into the very depths of his soul. Its mouth moved, mirroring his every expression, but its smile grew wider, teeth sharper. The teeth were jagged and yellow, like the fangs of some predatory beast. He could see the saliva glistening on them, and he knew that this was no mere reflection. It was a glimpse into a nightmare world that he could not escape. The lights went out, plunging him into darkness. The sudden loss of light was like a physical blow, leaving him disoriented and terrified. He could hear his own breathing, loud and ragged in the oppressive silence, and he knew that he was not alone in the darkness. Daniel's scream echoed through the house. Then silence fell. The sound was swallowed by the darkness, leaving only the echo of his terror. He could feel the presence of the doll, its malevolent gaze fixed on him, and he knew that he was trapped in a nightmare from which there was no escape. The next day his car was found empty by the road, but Daniel was never seen again. The authorities searched the area, but there was no sign of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air, leaving only the mystery of his disappearance behind. The doll, however, sat on the porch, its grin wider than ever. The sight of it sent a chill through those who saw it, a silent reminder of the horrors that had taken place. The doll's eyes seemed to follow them, unblinking and filled with a malevolent intelligence. It was a warning, a promise of the darkness that still lurked within the house, waiting for its next victim.